Pucks with Haggs is brought to you by Prizepicks and the Gametime app.
Welcome to the Pucks with Haggs podcast, powered by Prizepicks, the exclusive daily fantasy partner of the CLNS Media Network. I believe this is the 161st episode of the Pucks with Haggs podcast, so thank you very much for listening and tuning in. As always, I'm your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Subscribe and get yourself a premium membership. You get all of my Bruins and NHL writing sent straight directly to your inbox. I also write columns 3 times a week and do a Q&A session for the Boston Sports Journal. So go to www.bostonsportsjournal.com, get yourself a membership there, read all the Bruins stuff as well as all the other great sports journalism about the Boston pro sports teams that's going on that site. With me today, I have longtime friend and colleague Jimmy Murphy to talk some Bruins with me and dissect that gross 7-2 loss to the Buffalo Sabres last night. Murph, how's it going? And please tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Hey, I'm good. And you?
Good, buddy. Thank you.
You can find me at the Eye Test podcast with Pierre McGuire. We broadcast Monday through Friday, every day live, 4 to 5 p.m. on YouTube. And then I'm also writing over at RG Media.
Yeah, check out both of those and definitely check out the podcast with Pierre. Murph's got some great guests over there and always got good stuff about the NHL. So definitely check that out. Let's also thank our sponsors real quick, Prizepicks. We love Prizepicks. Download the Prizepicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prizepicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. When you play $5, you don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks run your game. And also our friends at Gametime, if you need any kind of tickets whatsoever, go to Gametime, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. What time is it, Murph?
It's game time, man.
Game time. That's right, Murph. You get it. I love seeing those commercials, by the way, when I'm streaming stuff now. Game Time's all over the place, and they do the exact same line. What time is it? Game time. So
yeah.
Game Time is a juggernaut. They're growing. Get your tickets there. That's why. All right, let's get into it, buddy. 7-2 loss to the Buffalo Sabres last night. We can definitely dissect some of the things that happened during the game that were bad signs and just reasons they lost. The biggest one is they score a goal and then they immediately let the Sabres come right down and score back against them. They did it twice. The first one was bad. The second one, when Marchand scores on the power play and they make it 4-2 in the third period, that's usually in years past where the Bruins will rally, will maybe scratch and claw for a point, certainly will make the third period competitive. But instead, they just, a couple of mistakes allow J.J. Petraglia to just basically go right down the ice and score on them, and it becomes 5-2, and the wheels come off again. We'll get into the overall road woes that this team has had this year, but just last night, your thoughts on that game, and just it felt to me like two things were going on. Like, it was the bad Bruins team that shows up sometimes and just doesn't give enough of an effort to even be competitive. And it also felt to me like they just didn't respect the Buffalo Sabres. They probably thought they were going to go in and roll last night against the last place team in the Atlantic Division. Didn't respect that they have guys like Tage Thompson and J.J. Petraglia that can hurt you. And they have some pretty good defensemen, some good skilled players. That's a Sabres team now that if you don't go in prepared to compete and prepared to play an NHL team, you're going to lose.
Yeah, for sure. Look, first off, I don't think it's an excuse, but you have to acknowledge that they are missing their top 3 defensemen. I mean, that plays a role for sure. And I think that we both agree their depth on D is not what it used to be in years past. So I think that hurts, but still even more reason to put up a better effort, right? And when you're shorthanded like that, everyone's going to have to get on board and next man up type mentality and rally around that. And I just didn't see that. And I haven't seen it all season. But last night was no different. And you're right. I mean, look, Buffalo's last place. They obviously have had a disappointing season themselves. They had hopes to maybe break through finally in the playoffs. That's not going to happen, but they've got pride. These are NHLers. They're still in that league for a reason. And I agree with you. I think the Bruins overlooked them, which they're in no position to overlook anyone right now.
No.
And so I don't think you can go in and have that mentality there. And I like what you say too about that Marchand goal. It's just, there's something missing with this team. And it showed again there where they can't seize on to a moment there. Like, they can't grab that moment and rally around it, like you said. And, it's been that way all season. I don't see it changing anytime soon.
No. And like, the thing that you see too with this team this year is they cannot stop like other teams' star players. Their star players get worked by the other team's star players a lot. The Scheifele game in Winnipeg, he had a great game and it just dominated the Bruins centers. Tage Thompson last night gets whatever he wants in that game. And a couple of those goals were just like easy, just no pushback and no resistance from the Bruins whatsoever. We've seen that in a lot of those, the blowout games on the road that they've had, is that their best players have a field day against the Bruins defensively. And I don't want to pick on them, but I think I've been fairly easy on Nikita Zadorov this year in terms of, like, he's had good games and bad games, and I appreciate what he brings to the table. And I think he's going to be a much bigger factor should they get to the playoffs, as far as the intimidation, the physicality, the way that he plays. Mm-hmm. But I think you also see times where he just gets torched and he wanders too far from the net. Last night, he was backing off guys as they were on the rush and giving them space and room at the blue line, letting them do whatever they wanted. You saw that one goal where Tage Thompson shot it between his legs and scored. Like, that's pretty embarrassing for a defenseman to have that happen to them, especially a guy like him that, I think prides himself on shutting other guys down. And I think last night, like, it was on him, obviously, to step up with Carlo out, with Lindholm and McAvoy already out. And he just didn't do it. And I thought Andrew Peeke had been very good in the stretch, too, where all these defensemen were out. And, he had a rough game as well. And it looks like, to me, it got to a point last night where, like, some guys are close to returning. They were missing one more guy. Some guys had kind of been maybe playing over their head a little bit or really playing well with a little more added responsibility. And I feel like it all caught up to them, especially with a guy like Zadorov, who basically decided he'd seen enough and was pissed off and didn't want to be on the bench for the end of the game, and picks a fight with Petraglia with a couple of minutes to go. And, like, on some level, I like that he was showing some resistance, some being pissed off about losing to the Sabres, and was going down with a fight a little bit. And was so disgusted that he just didn't want to be out there at the end. But it's also, you pick your spots with that stuff too. Like, it's I can see it from both ends, but, like, I honestly wish more of the Bruins were pissed at the end of last night's game and were kind of going down, scratching and clawing, instead of what felt to me like acceptance once they got down like 6-2, like, okay, it's over. They scored the empty netter with 5 minutes to go, and it's just garbage time now. But in general, though, a very poor game for Zadorov last night.
Yeah, you know what? Look, I think, Joe, we were on here maybe right before the season started. I came on with you, and I've said it in other places too. I like Zadorov. I think he's a very serviceable third pairing guy. Yeah, I don't think he's worth the money that the Bruins gave him. I think the Bruins maybe overrated him. Now, I get, they can't control the market, and some of that's the market. Some of them's overrating him. But I think the thing is, talking to a lot of his previous coaches, talking to some previous teammates, nobody questions his heart. Nobody questions his work ethic. But the problem is the brain cramps and like you said, just being out of position or taking bad penalties and inopportune times. And he's just always been this guy that his teammates and his coaches have had to reel in. And there's a reason, I mean, what is this his fourth or fifth team in like 6 years? Like, there's a reason for that. And it's not like he's got some great natural skill. And as I said, he's got a ton of heart, but you got to reel it in, man. You got to have more discipline out there, and you got to be smarter. And on a team like the Bruins, where, the margin for error is so slim, they can't have guys out there just kind of being reckless and running around and doing whatever they want. You can't do it. And so this has been the case all season. It's not changing, and they're going to have to figure out a way in the off season to work with him on that so that he doesn't do this next year. Yeah.
I mean, there needs to be improvement. You're right. But you also wonder with a guy his age and his experience level, like, how much is he going to ever be different from what he is now? There's a bit of a finished product element to who he is. Like, if he could figure out a way to not wander so far from the net all the time, I think it would be good. It would match his skill set better. But then again, like, there are times he kills plays off at the blue line and it's really effective, and like, you watch him and he's good at that in some instances, of really like lining guys up, blowing them up at the defensive blue line, at killing plays there and not letting them even get into the zone. But there's just other times too where he's just wandering so far from the net in certain situations, and you're just wondering where he's going. And you wonder how much of that is correctable and how much of that is just a part of his DNA as an established NHLer that, has got strengths and weaknesses that are never going to truly change. But, I do think I think over the course of a long, full season, some of his flaws will come out at points during the season. You know what I mean? Especially with the mental side of it and making mistakes and the mental errors. Like we've seen that now, that from time to time he has things that make you scratch your head and go, what was he thinking there? What happened? Mm-hmm. But I think in the playoffs, I think where it slows down a little bit, where it becomes a little more like grinded out and teams pounding each other, I think he definitely, that plays a little bit more into his strengths. And I think that I want to see the full scope of his whole season and what he looks like if they get to the postseason and how that plays there before I sort of make a full judgment on who and what he is. I think of the two new players that they brought in, the big money guys, I think far and away Elias Lindholm is the much more disappointing player of the two, and a guy that, let's face it, like lately when they've been effective, he's been playing third line center. You know?
Well,
like you've had
that's kind of where you and I had him though on a contender. That's what he's a 2 or a 3C on a real contender, Yep. So there you go. I mean, I'm with you on that. The one thing I look at with Lindholm too is again, I get that the market has a lot to say about what you end up paying a player. I understand that, but at the same time, I'm wondering what these scouts that were scouting him, maybe whoever their pro scouts are out west. Scouting him the last couple of years after Gaudreau and Tkachuk left, we've seen in him that they made them suggest to Don Sweeney, hey, this is your new 1C. This is who's going to replace Bergeron. Because if you look at his points, it's been a drastic drop-off. And I get there's going to be a little drop-off when you lose two line mates like Tkachuk and the late Johnny Gaudreau. But still, I mean, it was a drastic drop-off. And I just didn't see it from the get-go. And, I was looking just at him last year. And I remember having a conversation with a scout, and he said somebody's going to overpay big time for this guy, and it ended up being the Boston Bruins. Yeah,
and for me, like obviously it's the offense when you look at the points and you look at him not being able to shoulder his end of the load, and it's not just the points; it's like bad passes, it's not being able to handle passes from his teammates. It's like not being effective in the bumper on the power play. Like, it's a lot of different things where it continues to look like he's just not even like used to playing with the players that he's playing with. And he gets like surprised when the puck is coming his way and he can't handle it and stuff.
And we're in February.
Right. And I still like some of the things that I say to me, like he's not comfortable or he's not like fully into what the Bruins are doing right now for whatever reason. And maybe there's more there that we're still not seeing and that we'll see at some point. So I hold a little bit of like a reserved judgment there for him too, just based on that. But like defensively, he hasn't been good either. Like he hustles on the back check. He wins battles. Like he definitely does those things. He's more physical than I thought he was. Like there's certain things that he does that I really like. And you say to yourself, okay, I see what they see. But like a lot of the slot mistakes that were being made against the other team's best players, where they were leaving the slot wide open and like guys were having great chances against them, it was when he was on the ice and it was his job. And he wasn't where he needed to be in coverage. And that's the part where like if they were looking like for a Bergeron replacement, I am not sure what they were seeing in him if this is what he was doing other places, because like that is a killer. Like that's something as a center, especially a big time center that's going to be a two-way center that's going to play against the other team's best players. You can't make those kind of mistakes. And for a guy with the defensive reputation that he's had, a guy that's been mentioned as a Selke guy before, like I was very surprised to see that stuff.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And look, I think one of the things I didn't like from the get-go was when they're publicly saying, we see a lot of Patrice Bergeron in him. I just think that's an unfair, lofty expectation to put on a guy. Nobody's ever going to be Patrice Bergeron, and we all know that. But, I get what they were trying to say, and I get what they wanted. They wanted at least some resemblance of that, and I'm with you. I haven't seen it enough here. Now, look, again, and I think it's good of you to leave that reserve judgment, and we all should do that. And we'll give them this year. Like, this year is almost over. Who knows if they make the playoffs or not? The big test obviously will be if all these flaws are still there next year. But you look at it, Joe, and you look, if you were looking at the Bruins center depth going into the last year's offseason, now I don't remember exactly who was on the market free agent wise, but even if it had to be done through a trade, I just feel like there were better targets out there. Maybe you bring in him and another guy to get there and to, shore your center position up. But I just think that they really thought this guy was going to be like the number one center they've had for so long here in Boston. And it's just not him. He's a good player. Like you said, he's not bad by any means, but he's just not what I think his contract makes fans and media think he's going to be. And he hasn't lived up to expectations.
How much blame do you think Don Sweeney deserves or should get for based on, those two players coming in and not being, what they were supposed to be or what they're being paid to be?
I think he deserves a good portion. And like I said, I think the scouts too, who were, coming back to him with reports, deserve that blame as well. But I think my biggest thing with Don Sweeney right now, Joe, is that we think back to the year when they went on that record run, right? And they come out of that season and there was a lot of question marks about whether Bergeron and Krejci were going to come back. I think through that whole season, a lot of us had a feeling it might be it for them.
Yep.
And maybe there was behind the scenes, but publicly, I didn't see any efforts to start replacing them. And I thought it should have been done even years before that. Like, eventually this day is going to come. Eventually this run that they've been on of, competing for the Stanley Cup and having a great 1-2 punch up the middle, eventually that's going to come to an end. And you never saw them really focused on centers, whether it was on free agency or in the trade market. It was always getting a scoring winger or a depth defenseman. It was never on center. And if you look at Stanley Cup contenders, they're constantly building up the middle, and they're always deep up the middle. And if you're not deep up the middle, you're not going to win the Stanley Cup in this league.
No. And the biggest reason the Bruins were in 3 Stanley Cup finals in an 8-year span, and they were like as good as they were for, a decade plus, was because of the strength down the middle. It was Bergeron and Krejci at center. It was Chara at defense.
Exactly.
It was always having a really good goalie, and they were always strong right down the middle. And that's been the bedrock of the team and the reason they were as competitive.
Since we were like kids. Really, since we were kids, Joe. I mean, that's been the way the Boston Bruins are built, No,
100%. And look, on the flip side, you look at a team like Montreal, and the reason they've struggled as much as they have in recent history is because they've struggled to find like frontline centers, really good ones, and a number 1D, and to have that, solidity down the middle too. Like, there's other teams you can look at around the NHL, and the reason they continually struggle is because they don't build right down the middle like that. And,
correct.
It's probably easier said than done when it comes to the Bruins and trying to find that young center that's going to replace those guys. And look, I still have a lot of curiosity, interest in seeing how Matt Poitras develops.
Me too.
I like him as a player. I think he's a top 6 center in the NHL when he's like fully experienced, fully grown, fully ready. Like within the next couple of years, I think he's going to be either a first or second line center on this Bruins team, and a very effective one, very good playmaker, like good offensive player. I've seen enough out of him to believe he's the real deal, much more so than guys like Merkulov and Lysell. But like, you're going to also have, I think, some growing pains when you're putting a guy out there in a featured role like that, and low ride too, where they're up and down right now because they're getting their experience, and everybody clamors for the young kids and to play them. This is what happens when you play the young kids, especially in premier roles.
Bingo.
Like, you're going to ride the roller coaster a little bit.
Yep. I'm glad you said that, because I mean, look, and I get the fans, and I understand the allure of a shiny new toy, so to speak, and getting this young player with potentially a lot of skill and all that, and everyone wants to see that. Everyone wants to see that guy come up and play, but as you just said, it's not that easy. This is the NHL, and whether you're the healthy scratch up in the press box or you're a superstar, you're still in the NHL, and it takes a lot to get there, and sometimes players aren't ready. And we can go on and on about Lysell and Merkulov. I don't know if Lysell's ever going to be ready, to be honest.
No.
Merkulov, I think, deserves another look.
Yep.
But I like what you're saying about Poitras. I think with him, I really see him as a 2C, as a strong 2C. I'm not putting him anywhere on the level of David Krejci, but in terms of puck sense and intelligence out there and reading the play and kind of
similar characteristics,
seeing the vision, he's got that vision. And I really like that. And I think he'd be good in that slot. But again, that still leaves that top spot open. And, I know number one centers don't grow on trees. Like you said earlier, it's very hard to find, but they need to really emphasize that to their scouting department. Like going forward, you got to keep a close eye on A, B, and C centers, whether, it's in juniors or college or even at the pro level to acquire via trade. That needs to be the focus.
Yeah, no question. And look, they're going to be a better team for the experiences that Lowry and Poitras are getting right now down the stretch in these playoff level intensity games where sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. But I think this is good for them, and it's going to end up making the Bruins a better team for exposing them to this and continually putting them out there in important roles, in important positions, key spots against other teams, really good players, where sometimes they perform, sometimes they make mistakes. But I think you have to do it. But I think you also have to understand, like, you can't be chicken little about it if you're a Bruins fan and want to see the young players and then complain when you have like a 7-2 loss to the Buffalo Sabres, which stuff like that's going to happen when you have young players playing in key spots. And Lowry was over 20 minutes last night. Marchand was, Poitras was centering Marchand and Coyle. Like, those are big positions for really, like, guys that are 20, 21 years old in their first full NHL season to be dealing with. Let's take a break, Murph, in the podcast real quick. And give a little love to Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America and the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Instead of battling thousands of other players that could be pros or sharks, you simply pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you watch the winnings roll right in. It's fun and it's super simple. The big game is almost here, and it's now or never. Don't miss out on the last football game of the season with Prizepicks, the best place to win cash while watching the big game. Prizepicks is also giving away a free pick of the big game where one of the starting quarterbacks will only need to throw 1 yard to win. If you're correct on at least one more stat projection, you can win real cash. Prizepicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. That's right, I said Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prizepicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Check out the promo tab to tail any of our super sweat millie winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. Make your holiday bigger and brighter with Prizepicks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. I think Jalen Hurts will get more than 250 passing yards. Will Patrick Mahomes pass for more than 1.5 touchdowns, cook up hot takes with your friends, and win real money this football season and in the big game when you and your crew run your game on Prizepicks? You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prizepicks, and they also offer MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Download the Prizepicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prizepicks when you get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks, run your game. Let's get into the road stuff, Murph. 9-14-3 for the Bruins on the road this season. I have them. I did the math quickly before the show. I have them as a -37 goal differential on the road.
Wow.
Yeah. And if you think about it, it makes sense, right? All of their embarrassing blowouts have been on the road. The blowout loss to Winnipeg, the blowout loss to Carolina, the blowout loss to Dallas. They lost 5-1 to New Jersey last week. The game last night to Buffalo. Yep. There's been at least 5 or 6 games where it has completely gotten away from them in the third period, and they've just let it go. They have not been able to resist. They've kind of cracked and broken in these games on the road, especially against good teams. Not so much lately, obviously, losing to a team like Buffalo like that. But Joe Sacco was asked about this the other day, and this is what he had to say. I think the biggest thing right now is just sticking with it on the road. I feel like at home we've developed a really strong mindset where even if we get down by a goal or two, we just stay with it. We've had some comebacks in the third period at home when our guys have really dug in and they've been determined. So that same focus and that same mindset has to be there on the road as well. We can't let things get away from us, and I feel like that's happened to us a bit on the road. We've got to make sure that we reel it back in, reset, shift our focus, whatever it is you want to call it. But we need to understand that we're still in a hockey game and not let it get away from us. I think that's something that we can all do a better job of. You look at some of the other things on the road, matchups you can't control. At some point, it's just irrelevant, and you need to find a way to be a stronger team on the road. And he said this 24 hours before last night's game. Like, this has been a problem all year. The coaches know it's a problem. The players know it's a problem. And yet it still continues to happen. Like, what do you think? What can you put your finger on and say, you think these are the reasons this is happening on the road rather than at home?
I don't know, because I mean, maybe I'm losing my memory or losing my mind. I always felt like they were a great road team over the years. Sometimes played way better on the road than they did at home, because, as players will always tell you and coaches will always tell you, Joe, sometimes playing that simple game that you play on the road, it's a lot easier. And sometimes you'll see home teams try to imply that to get better at home. They just haven't been able to find that simple mentality. They haven't been able to conduce their game to tighten it up a bit. They're just too loosey-goosey, and I don't know what it is. I can't pinpoint it. If I did, I'd probably have a job with the Bruins right now, but it's pretty bad this year. It really is. I think guys like Brad Marchand too have been here for so long, are probably looking around saying, like, this isn't us. This is not what I'm used to right now. But I don't know what the answer is, honestly.
Yeah, I think there's probably a degree of shock with some of the older veteran players that are not used to what's going on, and like just bewilderment that it keeps happening. I do think also, though, maybe there was more of a focus and a concerted effort on this team playing better at home.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there is something to, they really wanted to improve as a home team, and they put a lot of focus on being better at home. Because think about it, the last few years, like, they've had some crap games at home, and they have had a hard time winning playoff games at home, big time difficulties winning playoff games at home. And maybe part of the focus and part of like the mantra for this team was to be a much better, tougher team to play at home, where, frankly, you want to make sure you're good at home. Like, Bruins fans are spending a ton of money on tickets to watch the team play. And the last thing you want is to go out and lose 5-0 and have a no-show on home ice when your fans have gone out there and forked, hundreds of dollars to go watch you play. And maybe that's got something to do with it. Maybe they were so focused and so determined to be a better home team that they focus. They're putting so much of their energy onto making sure they win at home and having a good showing at home, that it has not allowed them to have the same focus on the road, and they just don't have enough in the tank when they get to these road games. I'm sure, some element of that. There's some element of the matchups not being favorable. You can't shelter kids like Mason Lowry and Matt Poitras on the road like you would at home with the last change. That's certainly going to hurt. And I also, frankly, think there's a mental toughness element to this team where, like, if you're a mentally tough team, you don't crack and break as much as they do on the road. You don't give up and punt in the third period as much as they do if your team is really locked in mentally and is really focused and is really, like, on point. Even if you lose close 1-goal games and you're competitive, like, you're not letting it turn into like a 5-6 goal loss on the road unless there's some element of like last night. That giving up the goal right after you score, that's a focus thing. That's a mental thing. That is not as much an execution thing as it is a focus and attention thing, knowing that you need to be extra hard on that shift right after you score because they're coming at you and you just aren't competitive enough. So, like, there's some elements I think that I find interesting as far as why it might be happening. And I think there's also some elements of, like, this tells you a little bit about this team. And how much of what you're seeing on the road do you think affects how you believe this team would do in the playoffs, just based on what we've seen?
I think it totally. It's a huge reflection, Joe. And I think you really nailed it there with mental toughness. And this comes back to scouting and doing due diligence when you're bringing in new players and you're trying to mix them into your dressing room, make sure they fit, make sure they're on board, or they're type of players that can fit your game plan, both, on the ice and also mentally, like you're saying. I think you're really nailing something there, and they're going to have to reevaluate that in the offseason. I don't think it's something you can really change now at the deadline. It's more something you got to sit back and really say, okay, this guy I don't think he has it. When we need him to step up and be mentally tough, I don't think he's doing it. I'm not going to pick any names here. I'm just saying there's some guys in that dressing room now that don't seem to have that. And I agree with you on the thing where you give up these goals right after you score. And the fact that all these blowouts have been games that they started off pretty well, right, Joe?
Yeah.
That they're in it. And then one little
For
mistake
the
or
first
one
20 or
goal,
the first 40, yes.
it's just
Yep.
boom, and it snowballs, and that's it.
Yep.
And it's like it's out of control. You can't stop it. They're not, like you said before, the veteran core of this team that's been here for a bit, they're not used to that. And I think I'm not blaming them by any means when I say that. I just think that they've had a tough time adjusting to that and maybe giving the guys that have come in a little more, okay, well, this is what we do in this situation. This is how we usually respond to it and how we've gotten through in the past. And I don't think that they probably have tried to do that, but I just don't think that message has sunk in, and maybe some guys just aren't capable enough of it.
No, yeah, it's definitely a combination of a bunch of those things. And I do agree with you. I think there's been a significant element of change to this year's team that has changed, I think, the DNA of this team a little bit and the culture a little bit. And it's a little different. It feels a little different than it has in years past. Let's take another break in the podcast action to talk about Gametime.
Oh, yeah.
If you need any tickets whatsoever, go to Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime for obviously your Bruins tickets, but also if you're looking at tickets for the Celtics or even comedy or concert tickets as well. Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The game of the week for this week that can make an outstanding post-holiday buy is the Thursday, January 30th showdown between the Bruins and the Avalanche. January 30th showdown between the Bruins and the Winnipeg Jets, not the Avalanche at the Garden. The super deal is $114 for Loge Floor 21 seats, which is great value for Bruins tickets in this new year. Check in with Gametime for some great features, including priority Gametime picks. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. All in pricing, you toggle this feature and it shows you the total up front with no surprise fees at the checkout. And the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. What is better than 110% of the difference? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 after first purchase. Terms do apply, but again, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code CLNS for $20 after your first purchase. Download Gametime today. What time is it, Murph?
It is Gametime, Haggs, and I'm going to go over there. I want to get some concert tickets over there too, maybe. That looks
Gametime. That's right.
Yep.
What concert tickets do you want to get, Murph?
I'm looking at maybe a little, there's a band I like called the Interrupters. They're a good punk band. I've been really getting into them, and they're coming St. Patty's weekend with the Dropkicks. So,
there you go. Get on Gametime for that action. I like it, Murph. That's a great idea. All right, let's get back into the podcast mix. And do you think the imminent return of Charlie McAvoy and Elias Lindholm, who skated on Monday with no restrictions, seems like their returns are imminent to game action, maybe even Thursday night against Winnipeg, certainly maybe this week. What kind of a difference can that make? And is that, how much can you put into that to make right the ship here and make things right?
I think it's definitely going to help them a lot. I mean, these are their two best defensemen. And I think that a lot of Bruins fans, for whatever reason, at times, Elias Lindholm has become kind of the whipping boy of some fans over the past couple of years here. But I think right now, after how long he was out, I think people really realize how good this guy is and what he means to that team. So it can only help. But my thing is, Joe, and it may sound crazy, and I know Bruins fans aren't going to want to hear this, and maybe the team doesn't because they're in a playoff race. They're fighting for their playoff lives. But I almost would have kept them out, Joe, until after the Four Nations and just said, oh, well, they've had a setback, wink, wink, and given them a little rest. You've seen other teams do that right now where some players have gone back on IR that were coming back, and all of a sudden they had a setback. I think that's more so like, what's his name in Minnesota, Kiprusoff.
Yeah.
It looked like he was all systems go, and then all of a sudden he has a setback. Well, I think that had a lot to do. They just want to give him that extra time. He'll get now 4 weeks to come back and really be fresh when the season gets going again. And the other thing I want to know, Joe, is, I don't think the teams, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think they have any control. It's a player's decision. But if you're Don Sweeney, are you not maybe just asking McAvoy and Lindholm to consider staying home from that?
Well, Lindholm is not going to be a part of it. I talked to him about that the other day, and he said that the injury kept Sweden from putting him on, and he said he's focused on the Bruins. So Lindholm is definitely not going. McAvoy did say he expects to be healthy and fine to go. So it sounds like he wants to play and he's going to play. And he was trying to say that the injury was something that just needed a couple of weeks to take care of, and that now he's fine. Now, take him at his word. That's okay. Maybe that's exactly what's going on, and maybe it was just a minor thing that needed a few weeks to heal up. But I'm with you. I think if given how important he is to the team, given that he was banged up, I think that's a tough decision, and the priority needs to be for the Boston Bruins rather than playing for Team USA and the Four Nations, if it comes down to it. Now, I would expect the doctors and McAvoy and the Bruins would make the right decision as far as all that goes, especially with Don Sweeney being the GM of the Canadian team and not the
good point.
US team. But it's also hard to keep any of those guys from not playing.
Especially McAvoy. He loves representing his country, especially after those World Junior wins.
Well, and with the games at the Garden too at the end. You know what I mean? That's a tough one for any of those guys. And you could hear the disappointment in Lindholm's voice just talking about the timing of the injury and how it impacted his eligibility to play. And he was pretty bummed that he wasn't going to be doing it.
They could use him with those goalies being out now too. I'll tell you that.
No,
Sweden.
100%. But I do think I agree with you. Them coming back and Lindholm especially coming back, I think is going to make a major impact. When he got hurt, I thought he was their most consistent defenseman this year, and I thought he was having a very good year. And he's been out since before Montgomery got fired. Yeah, that's how long ago he was out, and he was when they were playing atrocious defense the first 20 games of the year. I thought he was their best defenseman, and they're most consistent. So him coming back will be a big difference maker. He was telling me he's the most frustrating thing about being injured and watching the games is just he knew he could make a difference if he was healthy and out there playing. And it's hard to watch when you know that, feel that way, especially when the team is losing games. Beyond them returning, though, and just looking at and seeing this team right now, and this plays into the tweet of the week here from Brian Luck 49. He says, can this team get it going so they make the playoffs? That is the question. Do you believe they will end up making the playoffs, Murph, just based on what you've seen? And what do they need to do down the stretch? What kind of names can fans expect to hear as far as trade, targets and trade people? I thought Taylor Hall would be a guy that would probably be in the mix to maybe come back to Boston before he got moved in that 3-team trade. With
Walker, huh?
Yeah, it was with Rantanen and with Natchez. But what is your expectation for what the Bruins can do and should do to fortify their playoff chances? And do you think they end up making it at the end of the day?
I'm going to preface this by saying, before I say if I think they'll make it or not, I think the worst possible thing for the Bruins right now is to make it, because I think it's fool's gold. And I think it gives them a false sense of where they are going forward in the future. I was really surprised, but also happy that Cam Neely was able to finally acknowledge, let's pump the brakes here. We might really need to retool. This isn't just going to be as easy as we thought, where we could do this on the fly and still succeed and make it to the first or second round, maybe even the conference final. This is a little bigger project than maybe we thought it was. And I think that's a good sign that someone that high up is recognizing that, even though, 2 seconds before that, Charlie Jacobs is preaching Stanley Cup, but he's an owner. He's got to do that. But I think you got to approach this deadline as a realist. Okay, am I saying you give up and you just throw the towel in for the playoffs? No, you got to keep trying for the guys on the team that are there. I mean, it's only fair to them, but you don't make any big additions. I just think you got to make depth moves. If all of a sudden something fell in your lap where, another GM just wants to get rid of somebody and you're going to be able to get him for a reduced price, okay, you think about it, and I look at maybe Vancouver. I think it's gotten to the point where in Vancouver, I think there's a reason JT Miller has not been moved. And it's obviously, like Jim Rutherford said, there's a lot of luggage there. You might be able to get him a lot cheaper than what you maybe could have a month ago. But I don't think the Bruins are in that mix. I still don't think that's a type of guy you want to bring in. Look, we were talking a couple minutes ago about culture. Do you want to bring in a guy right now who seemingly has ruined the culture of the Vancouver Canucks or been a part of it getting ruined? No, I don't like that. So I look at depth guys right now, but I look to the future too. Get some picks if you can. A lot of people are gonna call me crazy right now, Joe, and you might be one of them. But I'm looking at Morgan Geekie, and I'm seeing at least a second round, if not first round pick. You might get a GM that's desperate enough that feels he's right on the brink of making a push for the cup, and a guy like Geekie is that guy he needs in his middle six. do it. If you can get a first rounder for Morgan Geekie, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Well, especially where he's an RFA and he'd still be under team control after this year. You should be able to get a first round pick for a guy like that. That's like, on pace for 25 goals and, close, between 40 and 50 points, and is, shown that he can play with Pastrnak and play in a top 6 role and be pretty effective. Like guys like Geekie, Trent Frederick, I think those are guys I would entertain moving, more so Frederick than Geekie.
But what's Frederick going to get you right now? That's the problem.
Well, he could still get you a second round pick. I'm telling you right now, like teams are going to look at Trent Frederick and they're going to look at him as the power forward they are missing, that they don't have, the guy that can score some goals, that
just
will
needs
drop
a change of scenery,
is physical, and they can get a little more out of him than they've gotten with the Bruins. And I think, like, you might not be able to get the first round pick back that you invested in him in the first place to get him. But I think that ideally that's probably what the Bruins would like, is to at least get the pick back they used on him, like way back when. But even if you get a second round pick for him and a prospect, maybe, that would be good.
Or maybe a guy in his situation on another team that just for whatever reason can't seem to get it all together. He needs a change of scenery. Frederick needs one. Let's switch roles. Let's switch cities or towns or whatever. Yep. I think that's the type of thing I'd look at for Frederick right now, too. The one thing I'll say, Joe, and I agree with you, I think they can get a second rounder, but the only thing that worries me is everyone I talk to that's way more educated on prospects and drafts than me is saying that after the first round, this draft takes a big dip, that it's not strong at all. So, I think, like you said, a prospect is more of what I look at for Frederick than a pick, because I don't think you're going to get that great a pick after the first round. So it'll be interesting, but I think Frederick's gone for sure, and I also wouldn't be surprised if he ends up in St. Louis.
I feel the same way.
It makes too much sense.
Like, I will say this though, Murph. Like, for all the bad things that have happened to the Bruins this year, for all the disappointing losses, for all the up and down, it's just a very different team than I think Bruins fans are used to, and they're having a hard time wrapping their brain around that. They're still in a playoff spot, and they have been pretty much all year. And yes, they have some teams that have games in hand on them, and like it's going to be a hard road for them. But I still think if they can make the playoffs, they should. I don't think it's going to change their view on who and what they are. I think, as you said, I think Cam Neely talking about the two paths and potentially retooling lets you know that they understand that, some things maybe need to change with this team, and that they do need to reevaluate. And I also think making the playoffs is good for guys like Petraglia. Like, the younger guys should experience the playoffs. And, like, frankly, if Swayman plays the way that he's been playing in the second half for the most part and continues to play really good hockey, they'll be competitive. Like, if he plays the way he did in the playoffs last year, which I think you could reasonably expect, they're still going to be – I don't think they're going to get blown out in 4 games. I think they'll be competitive, at least in a playoff round. I have zero expectations that they're going to win a playoff series, though, or beat a quality team based on the flaws that I've seen, based on the way that they play. It could be like a 5, 6, 7 game series. And that's going to be hard to swallow for guys like Brad Marchand, Pastrnak, those kind of players. But I also think it's always the spot that they're in. They're not going to be like a basement dwelling, blow it up, like trade all our guys kind of a thing. It's going to be maybe trade some players that have some value that aren't in your long-term plans, build up some future assets, and still try to go for the playoffs, because they have enough to get in, I believe, and they also have enough to at least be competitive. But like it gets hard to say that the morning after you watch them lose 7-2 to the Buffalo Sabres. Like, there's been some moments like Tuesday night where you really like have to take a long, hard look if you're a Bruins, part of the Bruins organization, in the mirror, and say, what are we and who are we and where are we going?
Look, I agree with everything you just said, but the one thing I wonder, Joe, and I don't want to see people, I don't want to see anyone lose their jobs, but it's just the nature of this business.
Yeah.
If they make the playoffs, chances are there's going to be no changes of people making the roster decisions, whether it's Don Sweeney, Cam Neely, whoever in hockey ops. If they don't make the playoffs, I'd say the chances increase that there is a big change up there, and you have a new set of eyes and a new vision there going forward. And I, to be honest, I think this team now, they could always go out and bring in a president of hockey operations or somebody who oversees and advises Sweeney. I don't know if Cam Neely's going to allow that, but I would think that would be a good move. But I don't think any of those types of moves will happen if they make the playoffs, because it's going to give them a false sense of security. Yeah. I think missing the playoffs is the big, wake up call, slap in the face. And, Charlie and Jeremy Jacobs looking at the missed playoff gate tickets that they could have made and the missed money and saying, okay, we need to really step back here. And are these the guys to carry us forward into this new generation of Bruins? I think there needs to be a real evaluation of the decision makers right now. And I don't think it happens if they make the playoffs.
Yeah, that's a valid point, Murph. And I do think the bottom line is those changes don't usually get made until the owners feel like it's costing them money. Whether it's not selling out the games anymore, whether it's people not getting the Nessun Plus to watch the Bruins games, whether it's missing out on playoff revenue, all that stuff. That's what usually talks about making significant changes up at the top. So it'll be interesting to see how all that plays out the rest of the season. But I think there's definitely, I think all eyes are watching the Bruins as far as where this team is going in the path moving forward. And a lot is going to depend on how they perform the rest of this year and going into the playoffs. Murph, thank you very much for joining us, my friend. Let's also thank our sponsors real quick. Download the Prizepicks app today and use the code CLNS and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code CLNS on Prizepicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prizepicks, run your game. Let's also thank our folks at Gametime, where you can get your tickets. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. What time is it, Murph?
It's game time, Haggs.
Game time. That's right. Murph, thanks a lot for joining us, my friend.
Always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
All right, we'll do it again real soon. Thanks, everybody else out there, for listening. We'll see you at the rink.